February 26th, 11:07 p.m. Central European Time, and that would make it, what is it, 9? That would make it 5:07 Central European Time. I'm sorry about that. Yo, let's get into it, folks. Here.
We've had tremendous success. We've been given a lot of credit for having a very successful first month, and we want to make that many months and years, actually. But we're going to have many good months, and we're going to have many good years, I hope, and we're going to solve a lot of problems. We're doing very well with Russia, Ukraine. President Zelensky is going to be coming on Friday. That's now confirmed, and we're going to be signing an agreement, which will be a very big agreement. And I want to thank Howard and Scott for the job you guys did in putting it together. You really did an amazing job. And that'll be on rare earth. And
Now, this is quite controversial issue here. Trump is talking about rare earth. You know, he wants to use the United States bully power to just take things from allies. Before, we used to defend our allies, right, together, and of course was quite successful at getting the lion's share of a lot of trade. But a lot of trade for NATO and is set by the US by defense alone, right? But Trump doesn't seem to think that's enough. He's a billionaire. Elon's a billionaire. They've made all types of money off of the US. It seems to work fine for them, the system, right? I mean, you know, as far as money is concerned. But he doesn't think it's been that great. And so he's going after allies' rare earth. It's kind of like being a bully, you could say, because Ukraine didn't even have a standing army, pretty much. And but it's like, how could I say? It's not a very it's kind of like the big guy picking on the little guy in the room.
other things. And as you know, we're in for probably $350 billion. Europe is in for $1 billion.
Something that Americans are going to have to endure, sadly, is like the gaslighting from Donald Trump. Donald Trump, no matter who fact checks, no matter who, he repeats lies over and over and over and over. And that's what he uses these press meetings for. He doesn't inform his public of much. I mean, after all, he said that he's found all types of fraud. They haven't shown any fraud yet. It's been like a month and they're still finding fraud and not telling people. They're not going through the appropriate channels to report fraud. They're not being transparent enough to let people know or see the evidences that they claim they have. Yeah, and these are the billionaires.
$100 billion. And that's a big difference. So we're in for probably 3 times as much. And yet it's very important to everybody, but Europe's very close. We have a big ocean separating us. So it's very important for Europe, and they hopefully will step up and do maybe more than they're doing and maybe a lot more. The previous administration put us in a very bad position, but we've been able to make a deal where we're going to get our money back and we're going to get a lot of money in the future. And I think that's a
Notice how he just says a lot. It's very ambiguous. What is a lot? What is a lot? A lot could be a little to somebody else. But what does he mean by a lot exactly? Is that a lot for one person or two people like Trump? Is that a lot for one billionaire's business? Or is it like a lot for the American people? What is it exactly?
because we have taxpayers that are shouldn't be footing the bill, and they shouldn't be footing the bill at more than the Europeans are paying. So it's all been worked out. We're happy about it, and I think that
Elon Musk alone in federal grants and federal dollars, he's getting this kind of money that went to Ukraine. And that's just to fight people that are actually actively attacking the country. I mean, and attacking your allies, meaning attacking your trade, the people you trade with.
very importantly, we're going to be able to make a deal. Most importantly, by far, We're going to make a deal with Russia and Ukraine to stop killing people. They'll stop killing young Russian.
This is so erroneous to stop killing people. No, he should tell Trump, he should tell Russia, stop invading, stop bombing Ukraine. And I mean, Ukraine has a right to defend itself, right? I mean, do they or do they not? Um, and Trump seems to act like they're the ones who invaded Russia or something. It's crazy.
Soldiers and young Ukrainian soldiers and other people in addition in the towns and cities. And we will consider that a very important thing and a big accomplishment because it was going nowhere until this administration came in. They hadn't spoken to President Putin in 2 years. And so we'll keep you advised. Before we begin the cabinet, I'd like to have.
Mr. President, do you think that Ukraine should leave a part of its territory?
Well, it's a negotiation that's just starting, and they've been fighting, and there's been land that's been taken. So we'll have to see how that works out. That's part of the negotiation. I will say there was great unity in that room today.
Now, Trump says there was a lot of land that's been taken. Yes, there was a lot of land that's been taken. Does that sound like Russia and Ukraine got to stop the killing? I mean, he flips it. Totally, no matter what. Nothing that he says from day to day makes sense about anything. And that's basically because there's a hidden truth that he's not telling anybody, that if you knew it, then it would make sense. But listen to this. He totally contradicts himself.
Skype or what taken, so we'll have to see how that works out. That's part of the negotiation. I will say there was great unity in that room today. We were via Skype or whatever, but it was great, tremendous unity today in that room with the other countries. I was very impressed by it.
Territory is back. Can they take it back? What they lost in the past years?
That's not an easy thing to do, is it? Right? It's not an easy, just asking whether or not you can take back the land that they lost. And I say that, yeah, perhaps some of it, yeah, I hope so. But that's not an easy thing. It's very important to everybody, but Europe's very close. We have an ocean separating us, so it's very important for Europe, and they hopefully will step up and do maybe more than they're doing and maybe a lot more. The previous administration put us in a very bad position, but we've been able to make a deal where we're going to get our money back, and we're going to get a lot of money in the future. And I think that's appropriate because we have taxpayers that shouldn't be footing the bill, and they shouldn't be footing the bill.
So Trump, he can actually tell Putin to leave, right? Since he's using might and power, right? That's how he's dealing. But the only person that he seems to be using might and power against is actually Zelensky and Ukraine, and the demand about the precious minerals to pay back. Now, watch.
But more than the Europeans are paying. So
let's go back to this one.
Let's
watch Macron correct him.
Will you convince Vladimir Putin to accept the European troops as peacekeepers?
Yeah, he will accept that.
He will accept.
I've asked him that question.
You talked to him?
I've asked him that question.
He said yes.
Going to lift the block on the.
Because he's not, look, if we do this deal, he's not looking for more war. He doesn't mind, but I've specifically asked him that question. He has no problem with it.
Is France going to lift the block on the 300 billion in frozen Russian assets in Belgium? France has opposed unfreezing it to pay Ukraine and compensate the U.S. for its support. Is France going to lift its opposition to that?
This is, we speak about frozen assets. We already used them to back precisely the loans negotiated at the G7. And it's part of the sanctions. So it will depend on the follow-up of the discussions. But clearly, we respect international law. It's just frozen assets now. You can take the proceeds of the frozen assets, but you cannot take the assets themselves because it's not respecting international law, and we want to respect international
How is
law.
one different than the other? You can take the proceeds from it. How can you not?
Because it's very different. You keep the assets, you take the proceeds because they are paralyzed in a certain way. You take the proceeds during the wartime, but you keep the assets, and it's part of the negotiation at the end of the war. Because, this war costed all of us a lot of money. And this is the responsibility of Russia, because the aggressor is Russia. So at the end of the day, this
Now you hear the difference. Macron is saying that this is coming out of Russia's own assets that have been seized. That's what's going to pay for the war, right? And look at Trump's face. Look at Trump's face. He doesn't want Americans to know that the U.S. is also seized. They had assets, and I'm curious if Trump is going to give them their assets that have been frozen in the U.S. I wonder if he's going to give them back. Look at his face while he's talking about
frozen.
this.
I mean, this war costed all of us a lot of money, and this is the responsibility of Russia because the aggressor is Russia. So at the end of the day, this frozen asset should be part of the negotiation. All in all,
Will France support the U.S. being compensated?
I support the idea to have Ukraine first being compensated because they are the one to have lose a lot of their fellow citizens and being destroyed by these attacks. Second, all of those who paid for could be compensated, but not by Ukraine, by Russia, because they were the one to aggress.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we
Now look at how he his face right there. He had to say something. He totally flipped it from the assets to they're borrowing the money. I mean, this is ridiculous.
first being compensated because they are the one who have lose a lot of their fellow citizens and being destroyed by these attacks. Second, all of those who paid for could be compensated, but not by Ukraine, by Russia, because they were the one to aggress.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
Now look, check this out. In response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the United States, along with its allies, froze approximately $300 billion in Russian foreign assets. These assets, primarily held in Europe, have remained immobilized since then, right? Initially, these funds were frozen to limit Russia's financial capabilities. However, as the conflict persisted, discussions emerged about repurposing these assets to support Ukraine's reconstruction and defense efforts. Ta-da! You see, so the Trump could be engaging the EU about paying, right? About funds. There's 300 billion frozen just in Europe alone, but he's not going that route. In fact, he's pretending like the assets don't even exist. In December 2024, the U.S. Treasury Department announced disbursement of a $20 billion loan to Ukraine backed by the frozen assets. You see, this action drew sharp criticism from Russia, with the foreign ministry labeling the transfer as simply robbery and suggesting potential retaliatory measures, such as seizing Western assets with Russian territory. I wonder what that would be. Trump's stuff in Russia? Despite these measures, the majority of frozen assets remain in a state of legal limbo. Okay, so there are assets, and I believe the U.S. froze some things too, as well. But let's continue.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the U.S., loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear, we have 230 billion frozen assets in Europe, Russian assets.
Look at Trump's face.
But this is not as a collateral of a loan because this is not our belonging. So they are frozen. If at the end of the day, in the negotiation we will have with Russia, they're ready to give it to us, super. It will be loan at the end of the day, and Russia will have paid for that.
If you believe that, it's okay with me. But they get their money back, we don't, and now we do.
But they get their money. But look, that's so funny because the U.S. was going to get their money back anyway. And he makes it seem like him turning away from the normal avenues of getting your money back was like a good thing. Like that was positive. And he's complaining about how do we get our money back? He created the problem in the first place, so obviously there had to be a problem so Trump can find a way to get some assets for himself or his family personally. It's almost guaranteed.
But, you know, that's
We will
only
find
fair.
paths to do that.
We know it's not about the legal channels, obviously, or the normal channels.
So you think Russia is going to be the one that takes everybody back, or are they the aggressor?
Well, we're negotiating everything, and everything's on the table, and we'll see if we can get some land back, and we'll see about a lot of different things. And we're going to be making a little speech and say a few words in a little while. We're going to have another meeting, a luncheon meeting, and it's all been worked out. We're happy about it, and I think that very importantly, we're going to be able to make a deal. Most importantly, by far, we're going to make a deal with Russia and Ukraine to stop killing people. They'll stop killing young Russian soldiers and young Ukrainian soldiers and other people in addition in the towns and cities. And we will consider that a very important thing and a big
So
accomplishment.
Trump, in the last video, he acknowledged that Ukraine had lost territory. And he's speaking about it like now, like, stop the killing, Ukraine and Russia. Russia and Ukraine, stop the killing. How does the person who's lost territory stop the killing? That doesn't make sense.
Because it was going nowhere until this administration came, and they hadn't spoken to President Putin in 2 years. And so we'll keep you advised. Before we begin the cabinet, I'd like to have Scott and a couple of people say a few things, but most
All right, Elon Musk is coming up.
importantly, where are you? This is a gentleman who's going places, the head of HUD, and he's going to say, you all know him, and you're going to say grace, and then we'll vote.
I'm going to skip this part.
Tremendous vote, winning every swing state, winning the popular vote, winning the counties by thousands of counties. I think it was 2,800 to 500, 2,800 counties to 500 counties. Think of
All right, 80 million people in the U.S. didn't vote this last presidential election, and then 4.5 had their votes cast out for small irregularities, like maybe there was a misspelling in their address, or the text wasn't clear when they wrote their address, or something like that. Just a small infraction meant that 4.5 million people and something like 4 to 8, I think it's 4 swing states had their votes thrown out for small things like that.
that. And so we have a mandate.
But he's talking about his mandate, but Trump doesn't even have 50% of the American people voted, registered voters. He doesn't have 50%, of that. So even of the registered voters, right, let alone 80 million also not voting. So, and he's claiming to have a mandate that gives him the right to infringe upon people's constitutional rights and infringe upon people's lives, just the norms, Medicare, healthcare, a decent wage. This dude hasn't done anything to improve anything. In fact, everything he has done has only made it worse. And we're going to see how far this goes, because I just don't see how it's not going to hit the pockets.
To do this, and this is part of the reason I got elected.
If it's
I got
not
elected
already.
based on taxes and based on many things in the border, but also based on balancing budgets and getting our country back into shape. And this is a big part of it. So Elon, if you could get up and explain where you are, how you're doing, and how much we're cutting. And it's an honor to have you. He's been a tremendously successful guy. He's really working so hard, and he's got businesses to run. And in many ways, they say, how do you do this? And, he's sacrificing a lot. And
this is some extreme gaslighting. Americans, everyday Americans, sacrifice a lot. And this guy is going to use that term for hoarding when he's grifting, when he's stealing money, essentially, when he's breaking laws, getting away with crimes you could never get away with. This is literally the guy that was like, grab him by the private parts. And this is Jeffrey Epstein's guy, and he's sitting there gaslighting, and it's terrible,
getting a lot of praise, I'll tell you, but he's also getting hit. And we would expect that. And that's the way it works. So I'd like to have Elon Musk please say a few words.
Okay,
Thank you, Elon.
Thank you, Mr. President.
As a matter of fact, why doesn't Trump release the Epstein information? Why doesn't he release it yet? I mean, it's been a while now. It's a month, and he hasn't even mentioned it.
I actually just call myself a humble tech support here because this is actually, as crazy as it sounds, that is almost a literal description of the work that the Doge team is doing, is helping fix the government computer systems. Systems are extremely old. They don't communicate. There are a lot of mistakes in the system. The software doesn't work. So we are actually tech support. It's ironic, but it's true. The overall goal here with the Doge team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country $2 trillion deficits. The interest rates, just the interest on the national debt, now exceeds the Defense Department spending. We spend a lot on the Defense Department, but we're spending like over $1 trillion on interest. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing; it is an essential thing. That's the reason
And so raise the debt ceiling. You know, this is a ridiculous. He's saying all of this stuff just to say, let's spend more money, even more money, raise the debt ceiling. And they came in saying they were going to find fraud, remove it. They haven't shown any fraud, but yet they want to raise the debt ceiling while they're making an argument about all kinds of waste. It's like, where is the waste?
Here, and taking a lot of flack and getting a lot of death threats, by the way. I'm gonna like stack them up, you know. But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. That's why it has to be done. I'm confident at this point, knock on wood, you know, knock on my wooden head, there's got a lot of wood up there, that we can actually find $1 trillion in savings. That would be roughly 15% of the $7 trillion budget. And obviously that can only be done with the support of everyone in this room. And I'd like to thank everyone. And that would be roughly 15% of the $7 trillion budget.
Okay.
And obviously that can only be done with the support of everyone in this room.
Which basically 75%, maybe 80% is paid for by income and payroll taxes collected by everyday people. And he wants you to approve raising the debt ceiling so they can borrow $4 or $5 trillion more dollars to spend for the billionaire oligarchs. They don't want to cut the budget. They keep claiming they're finding fraud and cutting the budget, but Congress is trying to raise the debt ceiling. Trump is asking them to raise it by $5 trillion, and he wants everyday Americans to just give them that money. But what has he done for you? And on top of it, you know, this is just ridiculous. None of them are saying Americans should pay less taxes. None of them are saying you should pay less tax. The average middle class person, lower class person, they're not saying you, or even mildly well off. They're not even saying you should pay less taxes. They're saying they should get free money.
I'd like to thank everyone for your support. Thank you very much. This can only be done with your support. So it's really, Doge is a support function for the president and for the agencies and departments to help achieve those savings and to effectively find 15% in reduction in fraud and waste. And we bring the receipts. So people say like, well, is this real?
Where are the receipts at? Where are the receipts?
Just go to doge.gov. We line item by line item, we specify each item. So,
they're not showing. That's not receipts. Specifying, claiming to have found something is not showing the receipts.
I should say we will make mistakes. We won't be perfect, but when we make a mistake, we'll fix it very quickly.
This is the second time he said that while speaking publicly, actually, to the media, to the press.
So, for example, with USAID, one of the things we accidentally canceled very briefly was Ebola prevention. I think we all want Ebola prevention. So we restored the Ebola prevention immediately, and there was no interruption. But we do need to move quickly if we're to achieve a $1 trillion deficit reduction in financial year 2026. It requires
This is all these Project 2025 people in this room now,
saving $4 billion per day, every day, from now to
except Steve Bannon.
the end of September. But we can do it, and we will do it. Thank you.
Would you have any questions of Elon while we're on the subject of those? Because we'll finish off with that. And if you would have any questions, please ask, you could ask me or Elon. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Musk. I just wanted to ask you that President Trump put out a Truth Social today saying that everybody in the cabinet was happy with you. I just wondered if you had heard otherwise, and if you had heard anything about members of the cabinet who weren't happy with the way things were going. And if so, what are you doing to address those any dissatisfaction?
Elon, let the cabinet speak just for a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Is anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, we'll throw them out of here. Is anybody unhappy?
I mean, that's authoritarianism at its crux right there. You know, what is this? And they're just clapping along with that. You know,
They have a lot of respect for Elon and that he's doing this. And
look at this. This is ridiculous.
some disagree a little bit, but I will tell you, for the most part, I think everyone's not only happy, they're thrilled. So go ahead, Elon.
And President Trump has put together, I think, the best cabinet ever. Literally. So, I do not give false praise. This is an incredible group of people. I don't think that's
He doesn't give false praise, right? Sure. And not if it's going to interfere with something that he wants to get, you know?
such a talented team
Then
has
he'll do it. Then he'll give you false praise.
actually ever been assembled. I think it's literally the best cabinet that the country has ever had. And I think the company should be incredibly appreciative of the people in this room.
Boo. Boo.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Mr. President, thank you, Mr. Musk.
This dude thinks everybody is stupid.
Are there about half of the government employees so far appear to have responded to your request for what they've been doing over the past week? Is there a timeline in place for next moves for people being fired, and when can the American people expect to see results of that?
Yes. Well, to be clear, I think that email perhaps was misinterpreted as a performance review, but actually it was a pulse check review. Do you have a pulse? Do you have a pulse and 2 neurons? So if you have a pulse and 2 neurons, you can reply to an email. This is, I think not a high bar, is what I'm saying. This is should be.
This guy is a moron. You cannot request that these people give you that information like that, the way that he requested it. It's just ridiculous. And you could see how he does things. He does not admit fault. So you're dealing with a person that he's used to being in a situation where he's always right and he has the power. He's not going to accept that he made a mistake or he did something wrong, even though he said it. We'll make mistakes. But in reality, he doesn't. Watch how he just glosses over this.
So if you have a pulse and 2 neurons, you can reply to an email. This is, I think not a high bar, is what I'm saying. This is should be anyone could accomplish this. But what we are trying to get to the bottom of is we think there are a number of people on the government payroll who are dead, which is probably why they can't respond.
So why do they think that? And why doesn't he ask Congress to open up and do something, an investigation, a public hearing about it? He doesn't want a public hearing about it. And people, do you elect officials to not have public hearings?
And some people who are not real
On
people.
stuff like this, on fraud? All of a sudden we don't have public hearings on fraud, but we wanna break down fraud and stop fraud, but we don't want public hearings on fraud.
Like they're literally fictional individuals that are collecting paychecks. Well, somebody's collecting paychecks on a fictional individual. So we're just literally trying to figure out, are these people real? Are they alive? And can they write an email? Which I think is a reasonable expectation for the American public would have at least that expectation of someone in the public sector.
Mr. Musk.
No, that is utterly ridiculous. What if someone doesn't get your mail for any reason? There could be loads of reasons why they don't get your mail. And on top of it, this is such an asinine idea just to try to catch people that maybe are too busy or maybe don't see the mail for some reason, spam box or anything like that. There's loads of people that can't access their email for whatever reason. And he's just going to like cut you off of your services because maybe you missed a mail from him. You know, this is ridiculous.
Roughly a million.
This is not, it's not a high bar.
Keep in mind, it's taxpayer money. Taxpayers pay this money, and he's finding ways to just make your life miserable.
Guys, come on.
While he smiles at it. Look, you see this? He's got his hands all on the government apparatus. This is MAGA. This is also the minorities that supported Trump. This is also you. This is what you voted for. And the people that didn't vote, this is also what you didn't vote. You got what you wanted when you didn't vote. This is what you get. Richest man in the world. You know, oh my goodness. Richest man in the world. You could never be that yourself. And this is where you're elected. Someone should just play around, roll around in your tax dollars.
Responded so far to this email. Does that mean that the remaining 1 million or so federal employees now risk being terminated? And is it your understanding and expectation when you post a directive on X that the cabinet secretaries will follow that order? Because several agencies have instructed employees that this is voluntary or not to respond.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I guess it was like last week, the president encouraged me via Truth Social.
This is unheard of. This is the White House. This is the White House. And the press is supposed to come there to ask the president questions. And Trump has delegated that over to Elon Musk.
And also a phone call to be more aggressive. And I was like, okay, you know, yes, sir, Mr. President, we will indeed do that. The president is the commander in chief. I do what the president asks. And I said, can we send out an email to everyone just saying, what did you get done last week? The president said yes, so it did that. You know, we got a partial response. We're going to send another email. But our goal is not to be capricious or unfair. We want to give people every opportunity to send an email. And the email could simply be, what I'm working on is too sensitive classified to describe. Like literally just, that would be sufficient. You know, I think this is.
Now, so basically you hired someone that knows less than you about how the government works, different agencies and their actual mandates, like what their goals are and what their operations demand, you know, and he's saying, send me information, you know. I mean, this is ridiculous, but in any case,
I'm going to go right to Jeff Zeleny at the White House. Jeff, again, there are a lot of things that we are going to get to in our discussion here and our, not just our analysis, but again, our fact check. But I do want to start effectively where this being started about an hour ago, which is where Elon Musk was asked to present what he was doing, the idea that the richest man in the world was standing up, holding court in the cabinet room, dressed in his dark MAGA outfit, and his allegation that what they are doing is, he says, not to purge people, or it was not, in his words, a performance review. He claimed it was a pulse check.
Dana, it was extraordinary. Elon Musk did not have a seat at the table. That was reserved for confirmed cabinet secretaries and those who are awaiting confirmation, as well as a handful of staff. But he was center stage. There is no doubt about it. And that fact is not unusual. We've seen
And all these people that had to go through Senate confirmations, they're sitting up there listening to a dude in the White House take up all that time that has all that access, answer questions, and he hasn't even had to go through any checks and balances through the Senate. Nothing. No background checks. No nothing. He hasn't turned over anything about himself. And these people are sitting there listening to him. And this is what the taxpayers pay for.
Senior advisors to many presidents in a cabinet meeting, but never have I heard one be asked to speak and be given the floor like this. The cabinet of this administration was essentially the back.
This is why the U.S. doesn't have free higher education. It doesn't have universal health care. It doesn't have fair housing. This is the reason right here. All these people in this room and the things that they do, they want to raise the debt ceiling. They want to raise the debt ceiling. The U.S. GDP is higher. It was higher under Biden than it's ever been, right? And they want to raise the debt ceiling. They fought every social program that was being funded partially by the federal government. But that's taxpayer dollars. That's medium households, income households. A good percentage of that. So anything for you all under the tax dollars that you pay is just cut. You don't have the right to any of it, to decide any of it, to use any of it to further your lives as Americans. I mean, this is just extreme. This is utter thuggery and greed right here. The worst of it. The worst of it. And this dude to the right, Seth, what's his name? Pete Hegseth. He had the nerve to drink alcohol, take shots of alcohol at a NATO summit while he's answering questions to the press.
Drop for another wide-ranging press conference we've seen the president do. But on Elon Musk, once again, this is the second time we've heard him talk extensively about his plans. But of course, since we saw him in the Oval Office a couple weeks ago, so much has changed. Largely that email that he sent out over the weekend. And that, of course, has caused some of the first rifts between some departments, some agency heads, and the administration, and certainly the federal workforce. But the president asked him to defend that and clearly made the very obvious point that he's on the same page with Elon Musk, that he does believe, he called it a pulse check. He said that 1 million people answered this response, this email, which means more than 1 million did not answer it. And he said they're looking for fraud in the system. But also reporters asked the president and asked cabinet secretaries if there was any dissent on this topic. This is what the president said about that.
Hey, on the cabinet speak just for a second. Anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, we'll throw them out of here.
And they're all sitting there laughing about it, like they're encouraging this kind of behavior, you know. And maybe some of them don't realize it. They're attempting to laugh it off, like, but this is the exact opposite type of statement that someone should make, you know, like Trump. Yeah.
So that laughter there belied the obvious point that cabinet secretaries, of course, work for the president. So there is no one going to be voicing dissent, at least in that room. It's unclear how long this cabinet meeting will actually last. If it is a question and answer session with reporters the entire time, or if the president's actually going to hear advice from members of his cabinet. Certainly in nearly an hour, it was about 4 minutes short of an hour before we dipped out. There was no room for dissent. The vice president spoke at the very end there, but the president went on to say that the 1 million who did not respond to those emails may be on the bubble. And we do know that mass layoffs are coming. As we speak, agencies are reviewing plans. But one other separate piece of news, the president, at the very beginning, he said that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be coming here to the White House on Friday. But again, making no security guarantees from the U.S., Dana.
Yeah, he said that's going to be up to Europe to secure.
And so we'll be there in that way. But Europe will be watching it very closely. I know that UK has said and France has said that they volunteered to put so-called peacekeepers on the site, and I think that's a good thing.
Mr. President, you have been very clear.
The high cost of eggs, and we've seen consumer costs this week have a sharp drop from last month, the biggest dip in, I believe, 3 years. Why is that, your assessment? Why is that the case? And is there?
Well, I think that consumer confidence, if you look at confidence in the nation, it had the biggest increase in the history of the chart. It went up 42 points in a period of like days after the election, since the election. So since the election, the confidence in our nation, including right track, wrong track, the first time it's ever happened where we were on the right track, because this country has been on the wrong track for a long time. So the confidence in business, confidence in the country is
Can you feel the difference in the track? Tell me, is it a good difference or a bad difference, y'all?
reached an all-time high. We have never reached levels like we are right now. Okay.
Mr. President, you've been very clear in saying that as long as you're president, Iran will never get a nuclear weapon.
That's true.
Is it also your policy that as long as you're president, China will never take Taiwan by force?
I never comment on that. I don't comment on anything because I don't want to ever put myself in that position. And if I said it, I certainly wouldn't be saying it to you. I'd be saying it to other people, maybe people around this table, and very specific people around this table. So
that is a very passive. You see that? You see that? What is that about? Why is that an unreasonable
his
question?
confidence in the country has reached an all-time high. We have never reached levels like we are right now. Okay.
Mr. President, you've been very clear in saying that as long as you're president, Iran will never get a nuclear weapon.
That's true.
Is it also your policy that as long as you're president, China will never take Taiwan by force?
I never comment on that. I don't comment on
He never comments on that. Never. He never comments on that publicly. That would be, he's too afraid of China to do that, you know?
anything because I don't want to ever put myself in that position. And if I said it, I certainly wouldn't be saying it to you. I'd be saying it to other people, maybe people around this table, and very specific people around this table. So I don't want to put myself in that position. But I can tell you what, I have a great relationship with President Xi. I've had a great relationship with him. We want them to come in and invest. I see so many things saying that
we want them to come in and invest. He just slipped. He just slipped at the tongue. MAGA people, do you hear this? Listen.
So I don't want to put myself in that position. But I can tell you what, I have a great relationship with President Xi. I've had a great relationship with him. We want them to come in and invest. I see so many.
We want them to come in and
A
invest.
great relationship with President Xi. I've had a great relationship with him. We want them to come in and invest. A great relationship with him. We want them to come in and invest. I see so many things saying that
Donald Trump and MAGA want China to come into the U.S. and invest. That's a new one, y'all. That's a new one. That is what you voted for. It seems like a complete reversal, but you let me know, MAGA folk, is it?
we don't want China in this country. That's not right. We want them to invest in the United States. That's good. There's a lot of money coming.
Yeah. He just flew. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. This is MAGA. Make America great again.
We want them to come in and invest. But I can tell you what, I have a great relationship with President Xi. I've had a great relationship with him. We want them to come in and invest. I see so many things saying that we don't want China in this country. That's not right. We want them to invest in the United States. That's good. There's a lot of money coming in, and we'll invest in China. We'll do things with China. The relationship we'll have with China will be a very good one. I see all of these phony reports that we don't want any money, we don't want anything to do with them. That's wrong. We'll have a good relationship with China, but they won't be able to take advantage of us. What they did to Biden was, he didn't know what was happening. He didn't know what he was doing. The administration didn't know what they were doing. It was very sad to watch. But we're going to have a good relationship with China and Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East. We're doing things that, look, when I left, we had no wars. We had defeated ISIS totally.
Here he goes again, repeating those stories. Look, so right now, Trump is engaged in Somalia, right? And during his presidency, he was heavily engaged in Somalia. He left that situation over. I mean, don't be fooled, folks. The U.S. military is active right now in many places in the world. And Trump, he talks down to his voters and his followers, and they never fact check these things. And they almost feel ashamed to admit when the fact that he lies to them. You know, it's really like, some sort of gaslighting, mental oppression. You know, it's serious.
We had no
So
inflation.
he just repeats these lies.
We didn't have the Afghanistan withdrawal, the worst withdrawal anybody's ever seen. I think that's one of the reasons that President Putin looked at that. He said, wow, these guys are a paper tiger. Look at it. We're no paper tiger. Don't forget, we got rid of ISIS in 3 weeks. People said it would take 5 years. We did it because when I came in, I let
Paper tiger. That's interesting. But in any way, Trump is obviously going to go through the rest of his gaslighting. So
security, but I'll say as part of this land deal that they're talking about, that U.S. personnel would be there, made this sort of suggestion that perhaps there would be some fortification, if you will, just with business people. But when it comes to actual security, that would be up to Europe. Okay, thank you so much, Jeff. Now let's get to our Daniel Dale. Daniel, you were listening closely. There's so many things I want to ask you about. Can we just start with one of the things that we heard at the end there, because this was just completely factually inaccurate, saying point blank, and I'm pulling it up here, that CBS completely took her answers, Kamala Harris's answers, in the 60 Minutes interview that Donald Trump is suing over, and changed them. There were questions and there was some controversy around it, but the idea that they just completely changed her answers, we now see the transcript. It's available thanks to the FCC. It's not true.
Yeah, that's a good fact check, Dana. There's just so much in this cabinet meeting. So let me run through some of the big ones. I heard this claim again from the president. He's been saying it over and over in the past week, that the U.S. has provided Ukraine with $350 billion worth of aid, and that this is about 3 times what Europe collectively provided. That is not true. The $350 billion number is not true, nor is the idea that the U.S. has provided way more than Europe. So according to a think tank in Germany that closely tracks this aid, it is Europe that has collectively provided more aid to Ukraine than the U.S. has. In terms of aid committed, it's about double, about $260 billion for Europe to about $125 billion for the U.S., double, about $260 billion for Europe.
See, $260 billion for Europe. Europe is 450 million people, and the GDP is 15 trillion a year. The US is 350 million people, but the GDP is almost 10 trillion more. It's 27 trillion a year. And yet, but Trump is trying to make it seem like they're not paying their fair share. Their GDP is smaller and they're paying more. The US is GDP is bigger, less people, and you're paying less. But in any case, the US always gets the lion's share of these trade agreements anyway. That's what this is about, you know.
$125 billion for the U.S. in terms of aid allocated. It's narrower, but Europe still leads. The president also repeated this claim he's been saying over and over, that the U.S. ranks 40th out of 40 in some education rankings. I specifically asked the White House what those rankings were. They were not able to point to any of them.
Exactly. Trump, they use false statistics all the time, or these MAGA statistics, these conspiracy theory meme statistics that they throw around in social media, and convince people. And then he actually spits them out to the public, the people that may not even use those social media apps, into main legacy media, places like this, through the White House podium. It's terrible.
Appears not to exist. In fact, the U.S. Is above average in reading and science, and below average, though far from last, in math rankings, even of wealthy countries. He said the U.S. is the only country with mail-in voting. It simply isn't. He said the U.S. took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in the tariffs he imposed in the first term. In fact, Americans paid those tariffs. Americans make those tariff payments, and it's not true that Trump was the first president to impose tariffs on China. He said that we lose 300,000 people to fentanyl deaths every year. In fact, it's about 60,000 deaths per year. Still a tragedy, of course, horrible, but nowhere close to what he's saying. He said the European Union does not take American farm products. In fact, it is the fourth biggest market for U.S. agricultural exports of $13 billion per year. He offered another alternate history of the European Union's formation, saying it was formed to take advantage of the U.S. In fact, it was formed with U.S. support. So not even close to correct. So I don't even know where to go from here. He said there was no inflation when he left office. It was low, but it existed, about 1.4%. He said a lot of the U.S. fentanyl comes from Canada. In fact, 0.2%, about 43 pounds worth, came from Canada. So just a tiny number. And he was claiming, we heard a lot during his presidency, saying that President Obama merely provided gain with sheets. He used to say pillows in sheets. Rather than actual military aid. In fact, the Obama administration provided things like counter-mortar radars, armored Humvees, tactical drones. So it was not simply pillows and sheets. And I'll give you one more. He said that.
And here's the thing. Isn't that what they criticize? He's trying to say Obama didn't do enough, right? But he's standing there saying Biden did too much. Isn't that crazy? He has the two opposite positions for Obama and Biden. Obama did too little and Biden did too much. That's Trump's position now. He's complaining that Obama did too little, and in the same sentence he will complain, or in the next sentence complain, that Biden was just spending away loads of money, giving them everything. The war's got to stop. The war's got to stop.
The million people who didn't respond to this email, this 5 things that you did last week email from Elon Musk team, may not exist. I guess it's possible the U.S. government is paying some people who don't exist. But I think it's important to note that we had numerous agency heads, department heads telling their employees not to respond. So the simpler explanation is that people were instructed not to do this, rather than them being, fictional, non-existent human beings.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to ask you about. That is definitely something that when all is said and done, we're going to want the receipts.
Let's go back to what Donald is saying here. This is, again, what we've seen. He's trying to remake the global order. He is not the ally that America has been. It is changing, and Europe is watching this and acting accordingly.
Yeah, Katie, and thanks for having me. It's an incredible moment, particularly when you pause to think about the fact that not only is so much changing, but that, the continent of Europe and the entire world is tuning into these events that Trump has, hanging on his every word, trying to figure out what is the new American approach. I mean, we know that anything is possible now. We know that he's giving up on things that people have held as foundational truths for decades. But then there's just this incredible quality of just
he's given up on Taiwan. He can't speak on that either,
going to say, and he's as foundational truths for decades. But then there's just this incredible quality of just, what is he going to say? And he spits out answers to unpredictable questions, and you don't know whether he's making policy, whether he's just popping off about whatever's on the top of his head, whether this is a change in geopolitics or he's just kind of musing out loud. So it's just a moment of unbelievable change and really turmoil. And the bottom line is for the Europeans in particular, and we can come back to this, I think maybe the Taiwanese, a great sense of alarm and unease.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And then when you're looking at Keir Starmer, who's going to be here on Thursday, followed by Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday. Starmer is obviously going to try to keep Donald Trump in lockstep with NATO as much as he possibly can, as the French president did. And then Zelensky is going to be coming here and talking about this deal. How is Zelensky going to sign a document that doesn't make guarantees of security for Ukraine? How can he? What would incentivize him to do that?
Katie, I think really it's a sense that the alternative is worse, that, you know, you basically have to have some kind of American support here. You can't have Trump turn on you entirely, or Ukraine is basically cooked. And so I think the idea is, you can't really give him no for an answer. Now, in the reporting I've seen and my understanding and what I've heard about this agreement, there are some things to be determined later.
Two seconds.
Much diplomacy with Trump around the world right now is to give him perception of a big win, that the photo op, that the headline is going to be the most important thing, and maybe you can resolve some of the details later in a way that's going to be more favorable to you, or just get on his good side briefly and try to convince him to make changes later.
Are any of our allies looking at what Donald Trump is doing, talking about, again, he said a moment ago, is the 51st state, wanting to retake Panama, wanting to Greenland, take over Gaza. And again, there was a Truth Social post, an AI post that showed Gaza as Trump land with a Trump golden statue and Trump hotels. And in this deal that he's making with Ukraine for its goods, its minerals, stuff that we would want, is he looking just to divvy up the world with people like Vladimir Putin, with people like Xi Jinping, with people like...
With toy planes in his office, the Oval Office right there. Take a look, though, at that mirror behind. You zoom in right there. That's real. That's Elon Musk right there watching Donald Trump play with toy planes as Musk is really running the show and just destroying our government. We just learned this as well, that Doge quietly has deleted its purported 5 biggest spending cuts that it was celebrating, or perhaps the headline should be lying about last week. So those are now removed from the site. And here's what we're learning about as well, about 20 to 21 people who worked within the United States Digital Service Office, an office established during the Obama era that's supposed to help with all of the technology and the data and all of that. They're resigning. They're saying the reason for their resignation is because that they're unable to basically perform their functions. We swore to serve the American people and uphold our oath to the Constitution across presidential administrations, and we are basically being asked to violate our oath of office by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. So they resigned. Let's bring in Democratic Congressmember Robert Garcia. You know, we saw mass resignations, I think, last week or the week before at the Department of Justice, both at SDNY as well as Main Justice. We're seeing more mass resignations here. These are important people as well because they kind of hold the infrastructure together across presidential administrations. They're gone. Just what are you making of all of this, the chaos, the cruelty? What's going on?
I mean, look, this is what Elon Musk has been all about. I think that it's all chaos. It's complete destruction of the federal bureaucracy. And it's also incredibly damaging and hurtful to so many people. I've talked to so many people back home who are frightened. They feel like they're losing their job. They don't know what to do. They had to respond to Elon's crazy send me, your the 5 things you did for the week email, which then they retracted. So just a lot of chaos and confusion. And obviously, at the same time, Elon Musk and his tech bro crew are lying, and they're putting out savings that are not really happening. And so it's clear. The one thing that's clear with all of this is that Elon Musk is pulling the strings. I mean, he, for all intents and purposes, is the president. Donald Trump has abdicated all of his power and responsibility to Elon Musk. And Elon Musk gets richer by the day. He was just getting more and more and more wealthy. And being the richest man on the planet is not enough for Elon Musk.
I want to show you this, Congress member. There was a press conference held earlier in the day with Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary. She was asked the question about who is the Doge administrator? Is it Elon Musk? Who's running this thing that's inflicting so much pain on the American people? And they just gaslight. I want you to watch this.
With the world in
People voted for Musk, the richest man in the world. That's what they voted for. It's terrible, but
I wanted to ask about a federal judge yesterday was saying that they didn't know who the Doge administrator was and was asking the lawyer for the administration who it was, and the lawyer responded, I don't know the answer to that. Can you tell us who the administrator of Doge is?
Again, I've been asked to answer this question. Elon Musk is overseeing Doge. No, Elon Musk is a special government employee, which I've also been asked and have answered that question as well. There are career officials at Doge. There are political appointees at Doge. I'm not going to reveal the name of that individual from this podium. I'm